Okay, so I'm going to do data management too, so stay with me and enjoy the ride. Alright, so with data management too, it involves creating secondary variables or collapsing response categories. Now note that this does not apply to everyone, right? It doesn't apply to everyone. But then, for those that it applies to. Now, collapsing response variables is, sometimes there are certain variables that have so many categories, but then you realize that some of them belong to the same category. So, for instance, let's say you have a religion variable, right? In the religion, instead of collecting data on Christian, Islam, traditional, they decided to collect information such as maybe Presbyterian, Anglican, Assemblies of God. Like they listed all the different denominations of Christianity, and then there is also Islam and traditional, right? In that case, it is good for you to combine all the various denominations and just say they are Christian. So if you say that you are Anglican or Catholic or you are Pentecostal, you are basically Christian, right? So in that case, you put all of them together as one category and then have all the other categories as well. So that's what collapse and response categories actually means, right? So in my case, this government trust, I know that one represents from the code book, one represents strongly disagree, and so two will probably mean that disagree. Then three will be maybe neither agree nor disagree. Four will be agree, and then five will be strongly agree. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse the strongly disagree and agree to one variable because basically you just agree. You just disagree. And then I'm going to put the strongly agree and then the agree also together. And then those who are neutral will be in the middle. Right. So that's what I'm going to do now. So the code for doing that is you first create a variable, right? Or create an extra column and then you do something like this. So let me just copy this code. Let me just copy two of them. So first of all, I'm going to do data management too. Again, the actual section should be in the project assignment document. Don't use mine. I'm just using this for the video purpose. So I'm going to create another variable, right, or an extra column called let me call mine final trust, right? Final trust, and then I'm going to put n8 in all of them, and then the length is going to be the number of rows in my data. So my data has 4,788 rows. So it's going to also have, which means that it's going to have a column for, or it's going to have like, so it's going to show for all the various columns, right? And this is a new variable that I'm creating, or think about it as an extra column that I'm adding to my data set. Right? Now I'm going to say that, so I'm going to say that my data, sorry, I shouldn't have deleted this one. So I'm going to say that my data final trust, and then this part is going to be my data government trust is equal to 1, or government trust is equal to 2. So remember that what's it called? 1 and 2 represent strongly disagree and disagree. So I'm going to have that to be 1. And then I'm going to do the same thing for agree, which will be 4 and 5. We're going to have that as 2. No, I have that as 3. No, actually, if I do that, I'm making a mistake. So let me first do the other one, the neutral people. So the neutral people will be number 3. So those ones I'll give them to the least people. I'll give them to, yeah. If I interchange them out, the results will be the same. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to draw the frequency again to see how, instead of drawing the government trust, I'll now be drawing final trust because that's the, where the summary have been made. So I'm going to run this line of code. And now, you know, um, these are the people who disagree. These are the people who are neutral, and these are the people who agree that the government is doing pretty well. Now, when I look at my data, it now has four variables, which include final trust. So, if they said that the government, if they trust the government will do well, it's one. If they trust the government is doing number two, it's also one. If the government is, four means agree, it's three. Agree, three. Strongly agree, three. This is disagree, and that's one, and so on and so forth. Right. So, these are code is correct. So that's how you do creating a secondary variable by collapsing some of your responses. All right. So the next thing is creating aggregate variables, right? And this is again, this doesn't apply to everybody. Right? So this applies to those who, let's say, there were questions like, do you have a car? Do you have a radio? Do you have a motor? And you want to test for a person's wealth, right? And you say that if the person has one of those things, the person is rich, right? Assuming. Or let's just say there's a variable like, oh, do you feel bad around people? Um, do you try to stay away from people? And let's just see. I'm not very sure, or I don't have a lot of information about depression and anxiety and all those things. But then let's just say you're trying to test depression, and those are the variables, right? Do you try to stay away from people and all those things? And you want to say that if the person shows one of those symptoms, then the person has depression, right? That's when you use the aggregate variables, right? So if the person, so let's just say the variable, you have the variable called, stays away from people, stays away from parents, stays away from friends. Those are three different variables. I want to say that if the person stays away from parents or stays away from friends or stays away from family, then the person has depression. Then you use this kind of code, right? So you say my data anxiety. So you first create an extra column, obviously, and then you say if the person says that he stays away from friends, or the person stays away from family, or stays away from relatives, or stays away from la 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 and la 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 la, then just say that the person has depression. And then if the person says that he doesn't stay away from, so in that case, this part might be maybe two, 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 two. Then the person doesn't have depression. Do you understand? So that's what we're trying to do, right? That's when you want to create aggregate variables. Now, this part is for composite variables. So composite variables like you want to measure how much depression the person has, right? Or how depressed the person is. So you can say that if the person that stays away from friends and then stays away from family, but then doesn't stay away from relatives and doesn't stay away from other people, then the person is depressed number two. Or do you understand? Like, or maybe you're trying to measure performance and you say, oh, what was your score in math? What was your score in English? What was your score in French? And all those things. And you want to add them, right? That's what we call composite variables. So you want to find their total score or maybe their average score and so on and so forth, right? So that's when you use the composite variables, right? So the difference is quite clear, I guess. The aggregate is when you just want to categorize a person's condition if it satisfies one of them. And then this part is when you want to categorize based on score. So you won't add all of them, combine them and all these things. That's the composite. Again, it doesn't apply to everybody, but then if it applies to you, this is the sample code you can use to help you. All right. So Yeah, and then there's also renaming of variables. So remember that mine it says one for one is when you disagree. Two is and it's hard to keep them in your mind, right? So you can use these levels to see how you can rename them and not forget them. So I'm going to do that. So I can say levels, my data, final trust. Now if I print this out, it says no, interesting. But I know that my levels are one, two, and three, right? So I can actually rename them. Or what I can do is instead of saying is equal to one, I can say disagree over here. Then over here will be neutral. Yeah, which is actually a shorter way to do it. Just make sure that they are strings, and then this part is agree. Whether it's strong or not, doesn't really matter. So if I run this code, now it's going to be agree, disagree, and neutral. And this has actually sorted it for me, and that's pretty good. So yeah, thank you.